Today's piece is Etudes Australes, books 3 and 4 by John Cage. Um, this is a series of 32 etudes divided over 4 books, so this is the second half of them. I think they get increasingly difficult from book 1 to book 4. Um, got a huge program note here to get through, and we also have to talk about John Cage. The pieces themselves are actually laid out like kind of like 4 pages per etude. So that's etude number 17, and it's 4 staves because it's like a duet for 2 hands. Effectively, at any point in the piece, either hand can be at any point along the piano. So it's like incredibly just difficult by design. You can kind of see how it's laid out here. Each book has 8 etudes. The title comes from Atlas Australis, a book of star maps which was used in the compositional process. Any diamond-shaped note heads indicate a note to be held sostenuto throughout the particular etude. To keep such keys depressed down, you have to use rubber wedges. So I imagine like you would cut a piece of eraser to like wedge in between the white keys or black keys. In some of the later etudes, which is what we're looking at right now, all of the notes played cannot be written clearly within the allotted space on the page. So instead of opting for twice as many pages for a specific etude, John Cage has this appendix. Um, I guess we'll just come to them when we come to them, but yeah, you can see there's all these little appendices. So usually, I guess you'd see like some sort of letter on the page, and then you'd need to memorize this little thing. So, for example, Appendix F is these 2 chords, which I guess happens so quickly that there's no room on the page to notate them. In principle, the point in time of a note is its own and can be read by referring to its center. Notes connected by a stem are to be played simultaneously. So that's the point of the stems, is just to say these notes are happening at the same time. They're sort of like an aggregate. Open notes are to be held as long as possible. Yeah, octave signs, when there's no bracket, they just apply to the aggregate or note that they're on top of. In performance, there should be a correspondence between space and time such that the music sounds as it looks. However, as in traveling through space, circumstances sometimes arise where it is necessary to shift gears and go, as the case may be, faster or slower. And this was written in 1975, so I think he did all the pre-comp, basically, and devised how to notate it, and then it was actually notated and engraved by Carlo Carnevali and Wilmia Paulner. It was composed for Greet Sultan. This is a German-American pianist. Cage dedicated 2 pieces to Sultan. The first was part of his Music for Piano series, Music for Piano 53 through 68. In 1974, when Sultan was in the process of learning Cage's music of changes, the composer offered to write new music for her, and the result was the cycle Etudes Australes. Sultan made the premiere recording of the work and played it in concerts worldwide. Cage made a catalog of 3, 4, and 5 note aggregates, which could be played by a single hand without the other one assisting it. Overall, there's 550 4 and 5 note chords available. This is across the range of the entire piano, I'm assuming. And his other idea was to use star charts as a source material. And he'd already done this with orchestra piece Atlas Eclipticalis in 1961. And with songbooks in 1970, maybe not the entire piece, but I guess there's something in his work that he's been doing already. There's a paragraph here about the process of composing. Hopefully, it's clear enough. So he would take a strip of 3/4 inch, like transparent plastic, place it over the map. Um, so this would limit the number of stars being used because they're falling within the strip. And within the width of this strip, Cage would discern the 12 tones of the octave, right? So that would sort of give him, I guess, a pitch class basis for when different things happen. And then he would refer to the I Ching to use chance operations to transfer these tones into different octaves, right? And obviously assign them to left or right hands. So you can see that this does not, like the use of chance operations, it's not like a completely graphic representation of stars translated. It's more like their density in space is reflected in the proportions of the score, but as to where they fall on the keyboard and in which hand is kind of just like randomized. If you had strings of notes, some of them based on I Ching sort of operations, some of them would remain as single tones, others would become parts of aggregates. And now this sort of like distinction between aggregates and single notes, aggregates of various size, this is something that's controlled over the course of the entire cycle. So more single note things in the first book, and then more like aggregates in the later books. Okay, John Cage was born in 1912 and he died in 1992, so he would have been in his 70s at the time of composing this piece, or at least approaching his 70s. He's an American composer. He's famous for pioneering indeterminacy in music, which is sort of what we've been talking about. The use of chance operations is one aspect of this. The other aspect is like giving the performer freedom to do things. So, like, for example, proportional notation, right? And his performance instruction that we read earlier that encouraged the performer to speed up and slow down as needed, right? That sort of thing. He also has he's famous for his electroacoustic music and non-standard use of musical instruments. He's a leading figure of the post-war avant-garde, I think it's safe to say. His teachers include Henry Cowell, Arnold Schoenberg, both of whom he studied with in the 1930s. His major influences in his later work include East and South Asian cultures, Indian philosophy, and Zen Buddhism. This is how he came to the idea of aleatoric music or chance-controlled music, which is basically what he's been doing since the 1950s. His best-known work is, of course, the 1952 composition 4 minutes and 33 seconds, which is a silent piece. This has gone on to influence tons of composers, many of which we've covered in the channel already. Basically, any composer who uses silence liberally in their concert music is like indebted to Cage's work, you know. He's also famous for prepared piano, so he has these sonatas and interludes that he wrote in the 1940s, which involve inserting different objects and preparations into piano strings to sort of convert the piano into like a percussion ensemble. Cage is also famous for his percussion pieces. Like he's one of the first composers to work with unpitched percussion and treat it like art music. I'm thinking of his constructions, and he also was the first to write for toy piano, which has since become like a whole thing that composers do. I have intention to do a whole toy piano series because I have a lot of scores. Um, and a toy piano is basically just like any sort of uh, like fake piano where metal tines are struck with plastic hammers rather crudely instead of, you know, an electric piano doesn't count, obviously. He also is very influential with the New York school. So he taught a number of composers in New York in the 1950s who went on to really be sort of leading figures in avant-garde music. So this includes Morton Feldman, Earl Brown, and Christian Wolff. And all three of them sort of approach indeterminacy in a different way. Morton Feldman, whose music we've covered, he went on to sort of notate music very strictly in his later style, but he was always very, very much playing with silence, which, you know, is sort of influenced by his teacher. Yeah, some other important pieces would be his Concerto for Prepared Piano and Chamber Orchestra, which I believe is like a modular piece that you can take apart. Um, this is a piece that involved the I Ching, I think. Well, Music of Changes is the big sort of I Ching piano piece. And in terms of electronic music, there's also his Williams mix, which is a piece of tape music that involves splicing together many different types of sounds. I guess he didn't really get famous until the 1960s, and he had a lot of international fame, especially in Europe, and was pretty much based in New York his whole career after I think his education was out west. And I guess he did this like super complex stuff in the 70s. He also wrote violin pieces, which were like a companion piece to Etudes Australes. These are the Freeman Etudes. Yeah, his indeterminacy stuff. Some of the earliest people to be influenced by it was like in Europe, Witold Lutoslawski and Mauricio Kagel. His rhythmic structure experiments, I guess, started to influence a lot of the early um, American minimalists like Lamont Young, Terry Riley, uh, which we've covered these composers already. Yeah, I don't really want to get into all the like pop and rock acts that claim to be inspired by him. Oh, another thing about John Cage is he was really interested in the music of Eric Satie and lectured about Satie's music. Um, so that's sort of his work as a musicologist was like popularizing Satie. He was also like very well acquainted with abstract expressionist painters and visual artists while in New York. Um, so that's an important aspect of him too. I mean, there's so much more I could talk about. I think that's a fair introduction, and we'll get to know a little bit more of his music in the piano series here. But for now, we're going to listen to books 3 and 4. I'll put a link in the video description so you can listen along. I have no idea how long this is going to take, but hopefully it's like in the range of an hour or less. I guess it depends on the performer, but it's so complicated. I mean, how fast can you realistically play it, right? Okay, so I just finished listening to book 3. Actually, I accidentally listened to the first etude of book 4. Um, and this is taking longer than I expected, so I'm gonna break up the post listen into 2 parts. I'm gonna go to the gym and then come back and listen to Etudes 26 through 32, and they seem to be kind of getting slower as they become more and more difficult to play. It's honestly a little bit of a like it's hurting my brain reading along. So I haven't been super focused. Just having this one staff that's lower in between is like kind of throwing me off constantly. Um, there's not a lot that changes the character of each one, besides the fact that they're slowly getting more and more difficult. Like they all kind of have this uniform sound to them. I think my favorite so far has been number 23. It has a bunch of stopped notes at the beginning. So we have C3, yeah, C3, A2, E2, uh, D sharp 2, or A sharp 1, I guess, and then F sharp, D, B. So these would all be stopped with erasers, and it creates a totally different sort of resonance in the piano. This C, I don't know how this is chosen by the composer, but it seems to be the one thing that sort of changes the character of each etude. They all have different resonances because of the keys that are depressed silently throughout. Also, the 23rd one had a moment here where we get A flat, D flat, A flat, D flat, D flat, just single notes for a long time. And that was a fun moment where I realized how random everything truly was. Maybe something like that'll come up later. I'm starting to see more and more of these appendices pop up, and it that also makes the score harder to read because there's things that are being played that I can't hear. Um, for the most part, I think this is probably more interesting to see live than it is to read along with the score. Just because you would be able to see like how the two hands are moving all over the instrument. Um, it seems to be really intense performance practice, and I don't know if this is the way to do it to just play them all in a row because each one takes a little bit of setup, but that's how I'm listening to it anyways. So, yeah, I'll check back in later tonight. Hopefully, I don't have to stay up too late. Okay, so my thoughts on the second half. I think they got a little bit longer. Definitely really, really dense with notes and these um, complexes or clusters or whatever you want to call them. Um, I think like 29, 30, 31 were actually the hardest, and then 32 was surprisingly sparse and had a really nice resonant like key depression at the beginning here, so sort of like two clusters, A, B, and G, A flat with like a B flat in the middle. Um, so 32 was actually one of the better ones. I liked how it contrasted with the previous movements. I'm calling them movements, they're etudes technically. Also 28 was a really good one, I think. Yeah, 28 had some like more variety of sparse and busy sections, and it was like the last sort of like playable one before it got really crazy. And it has like five notes that have to be depressed, so it's a little bit more resonant. I mean, it was kind of fascinating, the ones that only had one note depressed the whole time, like because you would occasionally just hear that note sustaining. Which one has the D sharp? Maybe it was 26 or 27. Yeah, 27 had just this D sharp, and there was a weird moment where it was ringing out, like, and it was really making certain notes resonate. Must have been one of the sections where it was a bit sparser, but that was kind of really weird effect. I do think it's kind of fascinating that he made cataloged all these different hand positions, all the different chords you could play, and then just it's like a surface detail of the piece, right? You have these points of sound, and sometimes they're chords, and sometimes they're just single notes. Um, Really effective way to portray stars. I mean, it's like you just look at the page and it looks like a bunch of stars. Um, it's very alienating, like looking into space. This, I would say, is probably the most challenging listen of this series, the piano series, maybe of any series we've done. Like, this is really, really hard to listen to for an extended period of time. I think I can handle like one eight or two etudes, but listening to 16 of them was quite a task. That's our first John Cage piece, and from 1975, and we're gonna keep going back in time. Um, I'm not even gonna pull up what the next piece is. You're just gonna have to wait and see.